All right, three breakout players for this football season that I don't think we're talking enough about. Locked on Gamecock starts right now.
You are Locked On Gamecocks, your daily podcast on the South Carolina Gamecocks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, guys? Welcome into Locked On Gamecocks. I'm your host, Chris Marler, and welcome to the Wednesday episode of Locked On Gamecocks. Thank you for everyone making Locked On Gamecocks your first listen each and every day. Shout out to our everydayers. Remember, we're a free and available podcast wherever you get your podcasts, as well as on YouTube, part of Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Now, today's episode, it's not brought to you by a sponsor. It's brought to you by this haircut. Got a haircut. He's going to a wedding this weekend. Very excited about it. It's in South Florida. Not excited about that. But no hat today. I feel naked. I don't love it. But regardless, we have a good episode for today, and I'm excited to get into it. We're talking about breakout players that I don't think we're talking. Not breakout's not the right word. Let me backtrack here for a second. It's like surprise players that I don't think we're talking enough about. I feel like breakout doesn't make enough sense because also, for one reason, you guys are a very smart fan base and always like really, really good in the comments in terms of like being knowledgeable, knowing the roster, being able to pronounce everything better than I can. And another part of that is like, I don't think anyone would be surprised or at like a player that's going to be on this list having a breakout year. But surprising nationally, that's a little bit different. And I think when we talk about that, there's a couple players on here that really stand out to me that we're going to get into. First and foremost, the first player that comes to mind when I talk about a surprise player going into this season, it's Jaylen Kilgore. And you're actually already starting to see it from other places around the country. You look at some of these way too early mock drafts, and you've seen Lenore Sellers and both him and Nick Harbor being projected sometimes together in the top 10. But a lot of times you see them both projected in the first round. There have been multiple places that have projected at least two of the three, and sometimes all three of Lenore Sellers, Nick Harbor, and Jaylen Kilgore in the first round of next year's draft. I personally, I said this last year. I love Jaylen Kilgore as a prospect. I love Jaylen Kilgore, coming out of high school. I also love the fact that when you talk about like his like measurables, last year you had a freak athlete at safety with what do you call it? Last year with Nikki Minori. This year, a little bit different. You're not going to have that type of player, but as a 6'1", 211-pound defensive back, who's already played a ton for you at South Carolina, like this, what do you call it, over the past two seasons, and especially last year, I love it. I'm looking over the numbers right now. He was able to get 749 snap counts in. The other part that I really like about this too is you look at the way it's broken down, 328 snaps against the rush, like on rush defense, and then 412 against the pass. Now, obviously, you're going to make your money, and your bread and butter is going to be how do you flip your hips and get back defensively in the secondary, and what your coverage skills like at the position he plays. But I will also tell you his grading on rush defense was, I think it was like 76.9, which is one of the better. I think it was the highest on the team for you that you had last year for defensive backs, or at least like cornerback. So I'm very high on this kid. The measurables, 6'1", 211. It's on PFF, you have it 6'2", 219. I don't know if he's that big. If that big, you're probably shifting away from playing the cornerback position and playing more of a safety. But it's a guy that's very, very, very valuable to this defense. And when Clayton White, when I talk about like how good of a job he's done, especially at being able to get into getting like forcing turnovers. This is a guy that like 53 targets last year. He gave up 35 receptions. The coverage itself, you rarely saw him have any kind of coverage breaks. He didn't have a great game against Missouri. Didn't have the best game against Clemson. But a couple of times during the season, you saw him give up some like big pass plays. But for the most part, there wasn't a ton of yard after the catch. There wasn't a ton of players making huge plays. The guy that only had 2 penalties all season, 5 PBUs, 4 INTs. I just thought he did a tremendous job. He gave up 3 touchdowns all year, and he had more interceptions than touchdowns. As a defensive back, that's really good. He also was playing in his first season of like what I would refer to, honestly, as like significant playing time. And he played a lot. He was a first-team freshman All-American on ESPN.com, right? His freshman season. But it felt like he was more dependent on this past season than 2023. Like this past year in 2024, it felt like he was needed and had to be a guy in that secondary that was going to go out there and be a really good quarterback. I love the fact that you also pair him with Brandon Siss, the kid from NC State you got from the portal. And with those 2 defensive backs, like Brandon Siss, what you're hoping out of that kid as the corner that you brought in, also a tall, lanky kid, not as physically big as Kilgore, but also like a guy that is tall, lanky, and rangy and athletic as a defensive back. We saw this shift a couple of years ago in defensive backs. And what you want to see out of Siss is a guy that's able to lock down a third of the field, right? If you can figure out a way to take away a third of the field, much like you had several years ago, right, with J.C. Horn, who's now a star for the Carolina Panthers. Even that same year in 2021, you had Israel Mukuamu, who also was great. Fantastic, obviously, in that 2019 game against Georgia, but also a really, really good, tall, lanky, athletic defensive back. Then you even have guys like Cam Smith, right? Cam Smith was not necessarily the biggest at 185 pounds, like 6'1", 185, but like having that type of lengthy athleticism is really big. And you've seen South Carolina figure out ways to bring that specific mold of defensive back into the fold here in Columbia. I think Jaylen Kilgore is the next big player out of there. When I see his name pop up this early on pre-draft stuff, like, this is what I love about it, okay? And it's very, very simple. Jaylen Kilgore being talked about as a potential first-round draft pick next year is not because you heard Jaylen Kilgore's name talked about on ESPN a bunch, whether it be the website or on game day or on, like on Twitter, or if you saw it being talked about during games like a ton. Like you didn't hear that name talked about a ton like most of the season last year. Most of the conversation you heard about South Carolina was, did you see Dylan Stewart? Nicky Manwari is really good. How about these linebackers they got? Obviously the guy who was your best player and one of the best players in the country, Kyle Kennard, Defensive Player of the Year. Jaylen Kilgore, I wouldn't say he got lost in the mix necessarily, but what I love about the fact that of his hype going into next year, it's not because of his name. It's not an Arch Manning type thing, right? It's not this guy was a 5-star recruit and he hasn't been able to start yet, but we know he's going to break out. It's not about that at all. This is a tape guy. This is a guy that you have that scouts have put on tape and said, "Whoa, who's 24?" Like I know 7 back there is going to be really good. Okay, like I know 6 off the edge is really, really good. 19's been really, really good in the middle of that defense too, right? That 5 has been awesome. That transfer from Tech, but who's 24? And you did that last year in a secondary that was really, really, I think, like packed with a decent amount of talent. I think it's going to be even better this year. It concerns me, but like I've told you guys this before too. I think when you look at all the units on the entire field, whether it be receiver, which you could easily make the case as being the best and deepest room and unit on the roster, I think defensive back is right up there, if not higher, when it comes to that kind of ranking. I mean, this is a really, really talented secondary. And this kid with Jaylen Kilgore, I think he might be the best of the entire bunch. When we come back, we're going to talk about 2 more defensive players that I think are going to be breakout stars as well. And I'm going to tell you right now, one's going to be on offense, one's going to be on defense, one's going to surprise you. The other one maybe not so much, but we'll talk about that in a second. Before we do, I also want to talk to you about our friends at FanDuel sponsoring the show today. Now, you guys have heard me talk about this last night. I was off on my pick. I apologize. Hopefully none of you guys lost any money. I think the game had already started by the time we recorded. But the NBA playoffs are in full swing, and every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live. With player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays, Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. Listen, I love FanDuel for a number of reasons, but I love them mostly because there's so much action available at your fingertips. And it's before tip or after, just like they said. You can make live in-game parlays. You can bet on props for the players. How many threes so-and-so is going to hit, how many points, how many rounds, all of the above, or parlay all those together along with the game winners. Don't miss out. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com, place your first $5 bet, and if it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. We'll be right back with more Locked On Gamecocks right after this. All right, let's get into. I'm nervous about it. I'm nervous about to even get into this one because it feels like there's so much potential for what can happen at this position or these positions this year, but especially this next position. And man, I want to get into the other defensive player, but I'm going to start with the one that I think might surprise people more than most, and that's this. I don't think this is going to be a surprise to South Carolina fans, but there is not arguably there's not a better physical embodiment of a position and a position mismatch and a position matchup nightmare for opposing teams than the next guy that I think is going to be a household name by the end of the season. And I don't think it's really that surprising, but I think that it's one of those things, again, so few people outside of Columbia know who this dude is. I think he is going to be really, really good. And the good news for South Carolina fans, he's going to be really, really good and still have another year before coming back and being draft eligible. That's Michael Smith. Michael Smith out of South Carolina at tight end. Listen, I don't know why I said out of South Carolina. Michael Smith, the tight end, a sophomore. There's so much to love about this kid. Like his size, first off, 6'6", 248, a really, really good, perfectly sized, like I said, position matchup nightmare. Also a dude, when you talk about it, was a guy that is like a really perfect example of what you want in the red zone. It's one of their highest ranked recruits that's come through the program the past couple of years. He was a top 100 player out of high school, at least in the 247 composite. He was number 97 overall, number 5 tight end in the country, but it's still not a guy that you heard a ton about. Here's what I love most about why I think he's going to have a breakout, surprise, massive season for this team. The tight end was something we saw used so often last year, right? Josh Simon was really, really good. Josh Simon physically is not the same type of athlete as Michael Smith is, okay? And that's not a bad thing necessarily. I think it's more than anything, it's just like they were just two different types of players, right? One of the things about Simon that I loved about him so much, he was like almost a little bit more compact and felt like he was able to protect the ball a little bit more. He was better on these little intermediate routes. We saw it, I brought this up a bunch. We see it a lot in the start of the game. You'd see a play action, a rollout, try to get Lenoris an easy completion, go 4 to 6 yards. And hit Josh Simon out in the flat, see if you can get anything extra out of that. But either way, you're trying to get to a second and short. It's an extension of the running game. I got to stop talking so fast. I don't know how I'll ever stop doing that, though. One of my friends told me they were listening to this podcast at 2x speed, which for their own convenience, I feel like my head would explode if I had to listen to me talk. I feel like I already talk at 2x speed. My apologies. I'll try to slow it down. But Michael Smith, like I said, in comparison, 2 inches taller, right, about 10, 15 pounds heavier than Josh Simon, just a different style of tight end. Obviously, you want him to get better in the blocking aspect of his game because that's also something that's going to be important. So a run-first offense. But this kid, especially in the red zone, here's the thing people forget about with Michael Smith. Michael Smith joined the team in the summer. He was one of 3 total players from that 2024 recruiting class that did not enroll early. One of 3, and he still started 7 games. I mean, that's crazy. So now you're going into a new year. You have a full season of SEC play where he started 7 games, looked great, had a really, really good start to his career. And, oh, by the way, now he has a full offseason in the weight room, a full offseason learning the position, with his position coaches. Like, we're recording this on May 21st. May 21st. He hasn't been on campus for a full calendar year yet, and he is scratching the surface out of what can be a ridiculous career for him going into this season and next. I bring up the one part I think he's going to be a really big asset with, and that is playing inside the 20s. And I mean, like, well, mainly inside 120. But being able to have him, especially if he's split out, and I have a guys like Nick Harbor, and remember, we've talked about this too. You've elevated like the physicality and just the overall height of this receiver room in the offseason. But having him be able to split out, and you could have him in a slot, you could have him on that one side, and you have Nick Harbor on the other side. You have two guys that are 6'5 plus, and you have no one on the defense outside of maybe the guys that are handling the dirt that are that tall. I mean, we talked about 6'1", rangy, athletic corners that are tall, and like you no longer see these 5'11", 6 feet guys. People are over 6'1", long wingspan, all that kind of stuff. You better have somebody like that covering him, because if you don't have that person on Harbor, you better pray you have a plethora of size and rangy athletic guys to go up and compete with South Carolina's offensive skill position players in the red zone specifically. I don't know if we're going to see him utilized the same way with Josh that we did with Josh Simon between the 20s, but inside the 20 in the red zone and really you could back it up and say 30 yards out. I think you're going to see him be a target a lot from Lenore Sellers and being able to get him open, scheme him open with some designs similar to how we saw Dowell Loggins last year. The tight end has been a big part of this offense over the past couple of years. I think it's going to be again. And I think that like specifically in the red zone, I don't think you're going to see him get a bunch of these intermediate, hey, there's 6'6", 250-pound Michael Smith with a 6-yard reception. I think it's going to be him over the top of linebackers. I think it's going to be him in corner routes in the end zone. I think it's going to be him in post routes in the end zone. And like I said, being overall a matchup nightmare for a lot of these players. But as a guy who came in mid-year, like not mid-year, but like that's what it feels like at this point, right? Like 24 players in that class and 21 of them enrolled in January. You show up, in July or June or whatever enrollment is, and like, I mean, you're talking about a 6-month like head start that all these other players had. And this kid's coming in 2 months prior to fall camp, or prior to the first game. And that used to be the normal. Like that used to be the norm. But him coming in 2 months before that and then still being able to start 7 games, especially with who you already had at that position, I think it speaks volumes of the kind of athlete this kid is. And again, this is a guy who was a highly ranked recruit. I think at the end of this year, you're going to be talking about this kid as a potential top 1 to 2 round type of athlete at receiver. I don't know if he's ever going to be a guy that's going to put up crazy numbers. Like, I don't think he's going to Brock Bowers. I don't think he's going to be Michael, why am I drawing a name on this? Why am I drawing a blank on Kyle Pitts? I mean, he plays in a stadium like 2 miles from where we're recording this. But I don't think he's going to put up those type of numbers. I do think from a matchup standpoint and a physicality standpoint, he is going to have NFL scouts drooling over him and the possibility of going to get him early in the draft. All right, that is our second sleeper, surprise, breakout, whatever you want to call it. I guess we'll get a little more lenient on what we'll call it now that we're almost done with the show. When we come back, I'm going to give you one more surprise player that I think is going to have a really good season at the end of this year. All right, Locked On Gamecocks continues next. All right, we're back wrapping up today's episode with 3 surprise players, I think, for the next year. I'm going to give you one more. And this one's hard for me because there's so many good options. And I don't want to give you the receiver room because I think you're going to have multiple guys in there that are going to put up similar type numbers. I think you're going to see multiple guys in that receiver room that are going to have 20 to 30 catches, 300 to 500 yards, along with a couple breakout guys that are going to have between 800 and 1,000. That's just what I think. But that's not where my mind goes when I think like breakout, surprise player that you need to have a really good year. The position the position you need more than any other in this season, the biggest question mark you have, it's not at linebacker where you lost all those snaps, right? 3 veteran starters. It's not there. It's not in the secondary like we talked about. It's not at receivers, not offensive line. The part of this defense, especially in this league, that is most important is the trenches, and defensive linemen and the interior defensive line are the ones that I think are most important. Here's what I get most excited about, okay? There's a couple of guys you went and got out of the portal. Justin Oronkwo from Alabama is a guy that I think is going to be really, really good at linebacker, but I don't know if he's going to be a depth piece in year one or if he's going to be a guy that is a starter. I've told you guys this before, and it may sound stupid, but the quote out of Alabama when I was covering them during his time being recruited there, he was a 3 or 4-star recruit, but he's from Germany. And the coaching staff at Alabama at the time, which was a pretty good coaching staff, Lisbon Saban was still there. The comment that was made, and it was made more than once, was if that guy played in America, he would have been a 5-star. I mean, he is physically like a thumper that can play downhill in the box, come down through, like wherever you need him, especially in like a phone booth type area. Like if you need him going through an A gap, if you need him coming on the backside of to fill a gap, like to try and stuff a run on 3rd and short, all that kind of stuff. That's where he's going to thrive. Fast enough and big enough to coverage to play well in coverage, especially with tight ends if he has to. But by all means, he is a guy that's going to play downhill in between the tackles for a linebacker. Like he that's where he's going to thrive, and coming downhill and tackling a running back. That's him. The other kid you got out of the portal, though, from Georgia Southern, Troy Pikes, is a guy I get so excited about because Oronkwo was from Alabama. That's a big name, obviously, right? The other linebacker you got was at Alabama and then Florida State. 2 big-name schools. Florida State, terrible year last year, 2 big-name schools. I get really excited when I hear that this staff gets a kid from a G5 school and eyes them, because, as I said over and over, this is not me being a homer at all. These are just the proof of the pudding of what this staff has done year in and year out. From an evaluation standpoint, like an assessing the talent of a player, to a recruiting and then developing standpoint, no one in the SEC has done a better job of that from lower level players. And I mean lower level in terms of what school they play for, lower level G5 players than South Carolina has over the past couple of years. I mean, how many times have we seen it? So I love the fact they went out and got a linebacker that was a former 4-star from Alabama and Florida State. I love the kid they got from Germany who would have been a 5-star if he was recruited out of America. But when I see a 3-star from Georgia Southern named Troy Pikes that can fit an immediate need at the defensive line position, and oh, by the way, you got him over 2 other schools, and it was Ohio State and Georgia, to me, that's where the ears perk up, and I'm like, oh, tell me more about this. Because there haven't been a lot of misses, knock on wood. Have not been a lot of misses from this staff in terms of assessing talent and then bringing them on campus and developing them. So I get very excited when I see a guy like that. I want to read you a quote real quick. Our buddy Darren Osher said the other day doing an interview with BigSpur.com. Also, check out those guys. They do a great job. Obviously, I'm sure you guys already do, but tremendous work over there as well. Tons of great South Carolina content all across the internet. Hope you guys are consuming a lot of it. Hope you're just consuming ours first or second even. I don't care. But this is the quote about Troy Pikes, okay? He was our guy from day one. He was someone that we targeted from the beginning and played out that process. And he went on visits. He went on 2 visits, right? Look, it wasn't like we were the only school. Ohio State and Georgia, I think I think when you were competing with those big boys, they wanted him. He was a priority from us for the jump. We went and got him. Made him feel like a priority. We think he's going to come in and help us immediately right away, especially in that rotation. When you lose guys like Tonka, TJ, and Boogie, you're not going to immediately be able to replace those guys. They did so much for us. We did the best we can, I think, in getting that 6-man rotation, which is what we really want. So I'm going to stop right there. You lost a 2nd-round draft pick in TJ Sanders. You lost Tonka Hemingway. I've already told you a bunch of times about like the production those guys had at this position, which was what? 4 sacks apiece in a season, which is not something you see out of interior defensive linemen. But the depth that you lost, the veteran experience you lost, guys that had started multiple years in this program, played in multiple years in this program, a couple guys that were 4th and 5th year dudes in this program, that's all gone. And there's nothing that hurts the team more than not being solid up the middle. Seeing a guy like Troy Pikes who can step in right away because it is a position of need, and I wish there was. It's almost a position of desperate need, right? Because that is a position where like you cannot be soft in the middle of an SEC defense because teams will run right through you. And this is a position that has been really, really strong the last couple of years for Clayton White's defense. You need that to be the case. That you at least need to be the case for the front rotation, the starting 2 guys that are going to be there on most plays. But ideally, what you want is to have 2 and 3 deep. You're hearing it out of Darren Ursh's voice right there. It's saying you want 6-man rotation. You want 3 deep that you can go in there and throw in there. You've seen some of these Kirby Smart defenses over the past where it's like, yeah, so-and-so, like, when you're rotating 25 plays a game tops for a lot of these defensive linemen, and that's really what you want. You want guys that are fresh. You want guys that are really, really talented across the board, and you can rotate 2 and 3 deep and still be effective. I love all that from a depth perception, for lack of better words. But having the guy at the top of that rotation being Troy Pikes, I love that even more because I think he's a guy that can be really effective right away at a position of almost desperation, not just need. So those are my 3 surprise players for this year for South Carolina. We may even do this again as the offseason goes on. We are less than 100 days till college football season. Tomorrow is 100 days until South Carolina kicks off, and we can't wait. We'll be back again tomorrow with more Locked On Gamecocks. Until then, go Cox.